right, everybody, new review back again for part 2 of cards you should probably own, FFTCG edition. So the first card is going to be Maria from Opus 17. She is a light forward, cost 2. She is a warrior slash rebel, and with the support of warriors slash rebels in Hidden Legends Opus 24, I figured this card would be a great addition. So what she does is the forwards that cost 2 or less other than Maria gain 2,000 power. And when she enters the field, she can choose a backup, activate it. It loses all its abilities and also becomes a forward with 8k power. This effect does not end at the end of the turn. So it's still a backup, but it's still a forward. So you could have a backup with no abilities that now has 8,000 power and it can still generate CP. So I don't think, I don't believe you can play another backup in tandem with that. I just think it becomes a forward as well. So you can still only have 5 backups. But with that being said, I mean, that's a great way to have another blocker per se, or another, just attacker. And if you can give it haste, then, by all means, that's dope as well. Spiritus is going to be the next card. It is a 1 cost dark forward. So what it does is you can play 2 more dark characters on the field while he's out. When he enters the field, you can pay X, and when you do so, search for 1 dark forward of X and play it onto the field. When a dark forward other than Spiritus is put from the field to the break zone, choose 1 forward, up to 1 forward, remove it from the game. This effect only triggers once per turn. You can pay, I think Barnabas is 3. You can pay 3, you can play Spiritus, then you can pay 3 to search the deck, play Barnabas. Then you can proceed to go to Odin by priming. And then that way you have Spiritus and you also have Odin out. And you also have him in the event that you want to play more dark forwards or more dark characters onto the field. So he facilitates a lot of things. And then if another dark, is it forward? Yeah, when another dark forward leaves the field from your side that you control, you can remove 1 forward from anywhere on the field from the game. So he poses a threat, he searches, and he also, he has 2,000, so he's susceptible to a lot of things, but he also is a searcher. So, searcher, board presence, can start off combinations. So it's not terrible. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but I do like it for those little plays that you may want to think about in the future. And just because of that, I'm adding them to this list. Next is Materia. She pretty much has the same stat line as Spiritus. The only thing is that's different for her is obviously that she's light. But when a light forward is gone from the field to from your side of the field to the break zone, you get to draw a card. Typically, light and dark differ from that variation from time to time. Very rarely do they do the same things. And I feel about her the same way I feel about Spiritus. It's not the greatest thing in the world because of the stat line, but it searches your deck and it helps you facilitate certain things and gets those combinations that you may have a hard time drawing, especially if you're playing a one of light card or dark card. If you're playing Spiritus, it just helps get certain things going, and it's a pretty attractive card if I do say so myself. And it's also a legend that came out during COVID, so I don't know if they're going to reprint this, but I also don't know if this was also some kind of meta relevance type thing back in that time. So pretty sure that's what they're basing all their reprints off of, but once again, you never know. Next is going to be Princess Sarah. Princess Sarah is a backup, a light backup, and when she enters the field, you get to name an element and she becomes the element. This effect does not end at the end of the turn, and then you can dull her, and then all forwards as the same element as her gain 1,000 to the end of the turn. So cool thing about her is she is light once she hits the board, and before she hits the board, or field, whatever you want to call it. But once you name the element, she becomes that. So she's no longer light. So if you have another light character in your deck, you don't have to worry about it conflicting with her unless you play her second. If you play her second, then obviously you can't play her because you already have a light card on the field, and her element doesn't change until that effect goes off. So as long as you can get that effect off, she becomes anything you want her to be. So she kind of color fixes really any deck that you put her in to a certain extent. So I like her for that. Awesome art. Full art is very expensive. I think it's like $100. Right now you can get a foil for like $2 or $3, which is not bad. It has been reprinted, so the non-foils are pretty cheap, but go ahead and get yourself a playset of this card. You can't really play 3 in the deck. You can, but I wouldn't advise that you do. But it's a fantastic card, does a lot of things for a lot of different decks, and it's just only gonna do greater things in the future, in my opinion. Next is Squall, and we're doing a lot of light and dark cards right now. I understand, but he is a 4-drop light seed candidate from Final Fantasy VIII, also the city of Final Fantasy, 8,000 power. If you control 2 or more category 8 characters, the cost required to play Squall is reduced by 2. When Squall enters the field or attacks, choose 1 character, dull it, and freeze it. All the forwards you control gain 1,000 power until the end of the turn. Now that effect happens every time he attacks, and also when he hits the field, as I read. So with the Chaos deck, you're playing Fujin, Raijin, Cypher, and sometimes Idea. Obviously you can't play this if you have Chaos on the field, and you can't play Chaos if you have him on the field. But what you can do is, if you don't have Chaos, or you're all out of Chaoses, or you need something else to play instead of Chaos because you don't want to run the risk of not getting that extra point of damage off via Chaos's effect, you can play Squall, stall the game for a little bit, get your points of damage in. He gives all those people on your side of the field an extra 1,000 when he hits the field and when he attacks. And he gets to dull and freeze a character every time he hits the field and every time he attacks. So great card, very, very slept on card. Squall generally gets some pretty good cards, and this is definitely one of the top tier versions of Squall. Cosmos is a 2-cost light backup. She can produce any element that she wishes, and you can play any amount of light characters on the field, whether she's on the field, or wait, let me correct that. You can play her even if you have a light character out, and then once she's out, you can play as many light characters as you want. So she kind of goes well with Materia, because you can play Materia first and then get whatever you want to get out and then play Chaos. So if they get rid of Materia, you still don't have to worry about playing light cards from then forward. And the fact that she can be any element that you wish for her to be is even better. Her foils are stupid expensive, and I wish they weren't, because they're gorgeous. Her and the Chaos that I'm about to show you. But I think this card and Chaos are going to be great cards, because at some point I think there's just going to be so many good light and dark cards that you're going to need a way to be able to play more than just 1 or 2 at a time. And with this and Chaos, I think they're gonna be pretty good. Now, I just mentioned Chaos. Chaos is the same as Cosmos. The only difference is he's dark. He does the exact same thing as Chaos does, except for dark cards. So I don't really need to go over this one as much, but just keep that in mind. These have also been reprinted, but they these are cards you want to have a playset of, just for the fact that they're the only ones of their kind, and they're also from Opus 1. And I don't want the game to end, but these are like the creme de la creme of some of the best cards in light and dark, in my opinion, and I just feel like you should have them in your arsenal. Now we have another set of Spiritus cards and Cosmos cards. These do differ from each other. So it starts off by saying you can play Spiritus. When you play him, you can play 2 or more dark characters on the field. When he enters the field, gain a crystal. At the end of each of your turns, if you paid 2 or more crystals, gain a crystal. And then his ability is pay a crystal and duel him. Choose 1 forward. It gains 5,000 until the end of the turn. Now, the fact that he gives you a crystal for using crystals is really good, especially with these crystal decks coming out. Now they have a way to actually regenerate crystals outside of certain tendencies of playing cards. So he is a really good card, especially if you just grinding up crystals for abilities such as Glaciella or these new Warrior of the Crystal cards. So I think he's a really good card. Definitely get some copies, get some foil ones if they're cheap, but definitely have you some in your arsenal. The next one is Materia. She pretty much does the same thing. I will read her differences though. When she's on the field, you can play 2 or more light characters. They are both 1 cost, and they both have full arts, by the way. When she enters the field, gain a crystal. You can pay 1 CP and then 1 crystal and then duel her. Reveal the top 4 cards of your deck. Add 1 forward among them to your hand and return the others to the bottom of your deck in any order. You can only use this ability once per turn. And then her second ability is pay 2 CP, duel her, and gain a crystal. So the only difference between her and Spiritus is Spiritus gives you a crystal if you spent 2. You have to pay to get the crystal from her. She can search, or not really search, it semi-search for a card every turn by paying a crystal and paying the CP. So she's good in that regard. So they both have their little niche abilities. Spiritus is geared more to renewing your resources and protecting certain cards. She is used for getting more cards and getting more crystals however many times you can activate her, pay the cost, and duel her. So she is really good, and I suggest that you get her to your arsenal. Lucio, he is from Hidden Legends. He is the warrior of the Kindle Light. He also goes well with the warrior of the crystals because when he enters the field, he gets to search for 2 of them of different element and add them to your hand. At the beginning of the attack phase during each of your turns, he gains 2k power and 2 crystals. And then his special is Scintillating Edge, which is paying 1 CP and a copy of himself from your hand. Choose 1 forward, remove it from the game. Now, he is good because when he hits the field, he searches for 2 Warriors of the Crystals. Now, the Warrior of the Crystals typically only take a crystal and like some random CP to play, so it's pretty cheap to play him. Then at the beginning of each turn, your attack phase each turn, he gets 2k power and 2 crystals. So he becomes a 10k attacker, and then he gets 2 crystals. And then if you can afford to use his special, you get to choose a forward, remove it from the game. But if you have Glaciella, you can pay a crystal and a CP, remove a forward from the game. So as many forwards and CP as you have, you can remove as many crystals and CP as you have as your opponent has forwards. With Glaciella on the field, you can pretty much just clear their field with 5 crystals, 5 CP. So in that regard, this card's really good and really insane, and you should really have him, especially because he just came out. Raph is a warrior of the crystal, and when she enters the field, choose 1 forward your opponent controls until the end of the turn. It loses 4k power for each crystal you have. Pay 1 crystal. She gains cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities until the end of the turn. So she protects herself by spending crystals, and when she hits the field, she pretty much eradicates a forward for borderline nothing as long as you have crystals out. So you can, let's say, generate 4 or 5 crystals. That's anything in the game. And if you could somehow figure out a way to loop her, then It's it's a pretty deadly card, if I do say so myself. So these are cards that I think are really good to have, and also just, you know, it's a dark card, but it's also a great card. Let's put it that way. Next is Mia. She is water from job is Almathea, and she's from Mobius. She has haste, but she can't attack or block. But she can dull herself, cast one summon from your hand. The cost required to cast it is reduced by 3 and can be paid using CP of any element. It cannot become 0. Remove that summon from the game after use instead of putting it into the break zone. So this is good for stuff like a summoner deck. Cards that reduce the cost of summons based off how many summoners you have off, or based off how many whatever you have, because she can pretty much, with that combo, borderline get anything to 1. If you can play stuff like Arc for 1, that is insane. So combo her with the Terra that we went over last video, and I think you are pretty solid, because you can borderline play any summon that you want, because she lets you use any element as well. So really good card there. Unaleska. Unaleska is a 4 CP water forward, 8,000 power from category 10. The cost to cast your summon is reduced by 1 for each summoner forward you control, which I just mentioned. When she enters the field, choose one summon in your break zone, place it at the bottom of your deck. So recycling. So this is definitely a good card to run at 3. That art is fantastic. I really wish it was a full art, just because it's that good. That is a really good art. Very strong card. The only auto it has is when it hits the field. So as long as it stays on the field, that field ability is pretty potent. The summons can't become 0, but when you can cast a summon for 1, I think you're pretty much on the right track. Belgamine is a new summoner forward from Hidden Legends Opus 24. She costs 1. Cannot be chosen by summons. During each turn, when you cast the second summon you've cast, choose up to 2 forwards, deal them 4k damage. And then during each turn, when you cast the third summon you've cast, choose up to 3 forwards your opponent controls. Your opponent puts them at the bottom of their owner's deck in any order. So, depending on how you want to play this, you can essentially have it to where you have an endless loop of cards being either destroyed or cards either being returned to your opponent's deck. And if your opponent doesn't have resources to protect themselves, it doesn't really matter how strong the deck is, because you need forwards to win the game unless you deck your opponent out. So she is a good manner of control. She can't be chosen by summons. You kind of have to protect her from abilities, but if you can do that, you have a pretty solid card here. And she's a summoner as well, which goes with Unaleska. Next is Chocolate. She is a backup 2-cost wind. Dull her to place 1 item counter on her, and then dull her again, remove 2 item counters from her. You can draw a card. You can only use this ability during your turn and once that turn. So if she's active during your opponent's turn before they go to end phase, just dull her, get that item counter. And then essentially, if you have 2 or more, as long as you can activate her multiple times in a turn, you can either keep placing item counters or at least get 1 extra draw. Really good card, especially in Chocobos, because she is Job Chocobo, and in Wind it's really easy to activate all your backups. So this is a really good card. It's been reprinted. It's pretty cheap. I think it's like 20 cents, maybe 10 cents. Really good card. Definitely go get it. Atomos is a monster from Final Fantasy V, costs 2, 7,000 power when it becomes a forward. During each turn, when you cast the second card you've cast, choose up to 2 backups, activate them. At damage 3, you can make it a forward, and then when it attacks, activates all the backups you control. You can only use this ability once per turn. So the fact that you can either use it to be a blocker or you can use it as a backup to activate, or not a backup, a attacker to activate all your backups is even more fantastic. So these are cards that just work in so many different categories and so many different decks that this is just a very versatile card that you should definitely have. Rosa, cost 3, Final Fantasy 4, White Mage, 7,000 power. When you cast the third card you've cast this turn, activate all the backups you control. When you cast the fifth card you've cast this turn, reveal the top card of your deck. If it is a character, you may play it onto the field. And then you can pay 1 win CP. Rosa gains cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities to the end of the turn. I feel like this card is going to get reprinted just because it's a COVID set and it's still pretty expensive in the realm of Final Fantasy prices. Now, I think it's a really good card because it activates all your backups on the third cast of anything, and then on the fifth you get to essentially play a card for free if it's a character. So that's pretty good, and it can protect itself for the whole turn. I mean, that's just a really good card, and it's definitely something you should get, but just make sure it's not getting reprinted before you buy it. I don't want you out here overpaying and then, you know, just be careful. Evray is a monster of 1 CP, category 10. For no cost, you can choose 1 backup, activate it. You can only use this ability during your turn and once per turn. So Evray is just that guy. He just activates a backup. Counts as a cast when you play him. So really good facilitator. Thank God you can only play 1 on the field, because if you could have 3 of these things, he would definitely be a problem. So Leo's definitely getting reprinted. It's already been confirmed. He's about $30 a copy right now, so thank goodness he's getting reprinted. He is a 1 CP 1000 king. For each character other than Leo you control, he gets 1,000 power, and then the backups you control can produce CP of any element. That alone is insane. And there's a couple cards that can search Leo, and the fact that he does that, and the fact that it just now became a prevalent card is insane to me, because with an effect like that, you would think this card would really be everywhere. But I mean, right now it is everywhere. But don't buy it now. Wait for the reprint. Wait for it to be cheaper. Don't spend $30 a copy on this card, because that's just insane. It is a great card, but it's not worth the $30 for a piece of cardboard. Une is from 3. It is a earth water forward of 9k. Before paying the cost to cast Une, you can remove a total of 12 earth and or water summons in your break zone. I'm sorry, 2 earth or water summons in your break zone, not 12. From the game to reduce the cost by 2. And then when Une enters the field, you can choose 1 for your opponent controls and 1 backup they control. Return it to their hands, and then you can dual Une, choose 1 summon in your break zone, add it to your hand. So this is really good if you're doing that summoner deck, because as long as you can keep Une out, you can just keep doling her, get the summons back, so you can keep your hands full of summons as long as you can either activate her or every turn when she activates. And with it being a action ability, it's not an auto. Obviously they can respond to it, but they can't Amaterasu it, so you're good there. Shantoto is a 7 cost earth backup. If Shantoto's on the field, she is every element except earth and light and dark. So she gains fire, ice, wind, earth, lightning, and water. And then when she hits the field, remove all forwards from the game. So this is your forwards too. So just be careful if you're playing this. This card has been reprinted a few times, so right now is probably a good time to get it. It's pretty cheap. I think it's like $1 a copy. It's a legend, OG, Opus 1. So definitely get it. It's a great card. Really good if you don't have like a board wipe in your deck and you're playing something that can play Earth. By all means, pick it up, get it, and don't be caught lacking. Next off is going to be Miss Dragon. So Miss Dragon is a summon that has one of three abilities. It can cancel an effect of a summon of 5 or less, choose one forward you control, dull it, it doesn't receive any damage this turn, and then remove all the cards in your opponent's break zone from the game, draw a card. So here, obviously, there is quite a few good implications. There are quite a few implications here that are pretty good. It stops stuff like Amaterasu. It stops stuff like, well, no, not Leviathan. It can get rid of the break zone. You draw a card. It can protect a card on your field, a forward. Yeah, so it's a pretty good card. It's a pretty good summon. It's been reprinted a couple times. You can even get the Road to Championship foil pretty cheap now. I think it's like $10, maybe something like that. All around, it's a good card. It's definitely need to be in your arsenal. Next is Tyro. Tyro is an EX burst. He searches for a forward when he hits the field or when he's sent to damage. Either way, it's a pretty good card. He can produce any color, well, any element rather. And then at damage 5, you can duel him, choose a forward, it gains 2k power to the end of the turn. That 2k power comes up sometimes, but it's very rare. But when it does, it's very positive. He is also a searcher on damage and on play. And then he can also produce any element at will. So he is a all around good card. And I don't see how they can make a card that's going to rival him without it being a little more stronger than Tyro already is. Next is Kusith. It is pretty basic summon, but it's an EX burst and it's been printed a few times, so it's pretty cheap and easy to get at the moment. But it just chooses the backup or forward in the break zone, add it to your hand. So easy little recursion from your break zone to get back an essential piece that you need. And with stuff like Une, you can just keep looping him to pretty much never really run out of the resource that you need. So that's always a good thing to have. Amaterasu, I would say probably the best summon in the game, just because it cancels auto abilities and it doesn't actually target the forward. So it's very hard to stop this outside of stuff like Mist Dragon. And there's a few summons and backups that can stop the effects of summons, but there's not a lot. So Amaterasu is kind of in a class of its own. It's been reprinted a few times as full arts, monthly promos, even in reprint set boxes that have introduced new starter decks. So this is a really good card, and everybody should have at least 3, no matter what element you're playing, because you never know when you can dip into fire or you can play Amaterasu for free. So make sure you have a copy, or 3 copies for that matter. Titus from Opus 19 from Nightmares. This is probably one of my favorite Titus cards. It's when it hits the field or EX burst, you can choose a forward of cost 5 or less, put it at the bottom of your opponent's deck. Then you can remove 20 cards in the break zone from the game, play Titus onto the field. You can only use this ability during your main phase and if he's in the break zone. So for obvious reasons, he is pretty good. My favorite part is he's an 8K'er and he can send a forward back to the bottom of your opponent's deck. And that's pretty helpful when it comes down to it, because 1, it's EX burst, and 2, it can happen on the field when you play it. And with 10 being such a powerhouse as far as cards go, I think this card is really good to have in your arsenal, even if you're just playing 1, just for the simple fact that you never know when you need something to get rid of something in a deck that might not have that much removal. So this is a card that I think everyone should at least have one of. Maybe not a playset, but at least one. Alcid. Outset's been reprinted a couple times, and when he hits the field, you may play one ice or lightning forward or cost 4 or less from your hand onto the field. When Outset or an ice forward enters your field, choose one forward, freeze it. When a lightning forward you control attacks, choose one forward, dull it. So when he hits the field, he's automatically going to let you play a lightning or a ice forward. And since he is an ice forward, he freezes something upon entry, which is why it says when he or an ice forward. And then when a lightning forward attacks, choose something and dull it. So as long as you can maintain ice and lightning presence on the field, you are pretty solid on locking down your opponent's forwards at least. He has 8K. He is a legend. He used to be really expensive. Even if you want a foil and a full art version of him that's foil, he's still going to cost you a pretty penny. But he is one of the best Ice Lightning cards in the game as of right now. I don't know if they're going to make more, but he is just really good on the uptick of things like that. Next is Alize from, I think it's Dawn of Heroes. She is a hero. When she hits the field, choose one job Scion of the 7 Dawn of cost 3 or less in your break zone, play it onto the field. When a water forward enters your field, choose one forward your opponent controls, dull it. This effect will only trigger once per turn. So she can play stuff like Alphino. I think there's an Urianger that's less than this 3 or less. I know there's a couple Ishtolas. There's a couple things that she can play that she can benefit off the effect of, but typically people play her, get Ishtola, the cost 3 lightning one, deal 8k to something or make it lose 8k, and then go straight into using Ishtola's special to deal 9k to all jobs that aren't Scion of the 7 Dawn forwards. So this card's really good. And then a little niche effect is when you play a water forward, you get to dull something. And typically the Scions of the 7 Dawn deck is water lightning. So this just adds a little more spice to this card. It doesn't have the best stat line as far as being 5,000 power, but overall it is a really good card, especially for that deck. And it doesn't even have to be the Scion deck. It can just be a standard lightning water deck. And it's still the chef's kiss. Next is Astinian. Astinian is pretty strong. He has a warp of 1 lightning CP, and he only warps for 1 turn. When he hits the field, he automatically has haste, but then if he hits the field due to warp until the end of the turn, he gains brave and he can attack twice in the same turn. And then his standard auto ability is when he attacks, he gets 10,000 power and first strike. Now this is a card people usually play. They warp it out turn 1 or their turn 1, and that way their opponent doesn't have any blockers. It's guaranteed at least 1 point of damage, and if no EX bursts that stifle this card, it's 2 points of damage. And then you still have a 8k body on the field that has brave for that turn, sitting at 28,000, which is just insane because there's nothing. You can block it, of course, but at the end of the day, like there's not anything messing with him as far as attack power, especially if that auto ability goes off. So he's just a good card to have if you're playing lightning. In general, you need to push for some extra damage. Irvine, probably one of the strongest Final Fantasy VIII cards right now outside of maybe Cypher and Edea. When he hits the field or attacks, choose 2 cards in your opponent's break zone, remove them from the game. If 2 characters are removed from the game by this effect until the end of the turn, Irvine gains 2k power, haste, and first strike. And then his special ability is to throw away a copy of himself and 1 lightning CP. Choose 1 forward or monster if cost 5 or less, break it. So it's not hard to get Irvine to your hand, even if you're using a different Irvine, because 8 has so many ways to search Irvine or characters named Irvine. But his just auto ability is, I hit the field, I'm gonna get rid of, if I'm playing warrior, like I'm gonna get rid of Refia and Ferris, or 2 Refias or whatever that's gonna hinder me. he gets to attack that turn because he gets haste and first strike. And then when he attacks, he gets to do it again. So he goes from a 7K the first turn he hits the field to an 11K with first strike. Even if he goes against a Warrior of Light, yes, Warrior of Light will ping him for 5K. But if that Warrior of Light attacks, it doesn't really, or blocks, it doesn't really matter because he has 1,000 more. And yes, you will lose your Irvine, but you get rid of Warrior Light and you got rid of 4 cards in their break zone that were causing the problem. So you kind of have to look at the positives that you get as far as the compromising negatives when it comes to cards like this. But he's pretty good and I like him, and I typically run him myself. Next is the Warrior Light that I just mentioned. He has all the keywords. He has haste, first strike, and brave. You can only cast him by paying CP by backups. When he enters the field, due to being casted, activate all the backups you control, draw 1 card. You can duel him, choose 1 forward, deal at 5,000. So this is right now the pinnacle of what a card looks like, because it not only can finish off a card, it always can attack. It has first strike, it has brave, so it can attack and still be a blocker. He is essentially the Warrior of Light because that's who he is. He is the first, best to ever do it, and he is still pretty expensive. I know he's getting a full art version that's signed in the Legacy collection, but I don't know if he's getting an actual reprint. So keep your eye out on that. If it gets confirmed, I'll make a video stating as much, but as of right now, I don't know. So just keep your eye out on that. And yeah, he is a good card, and just realize that you can play him without casting him. Fun fact. Next is Gilgamesh, FFBE. He is a legend. He is still like $30. He is guaranteed getting a reprint in the Legacy collection. Thank goodness. And this is his effects. If you have 3 or more different elements among the cards in your break zone, he gains 1,000 haste, first strike, and if you have 7 or more, he gets brave plus the abilities or keywords I just mentioned, and he can attack 3 times in the same turn. And then if you have 5 or more elements when he attacks, he gets to dull and freeze a character. So if he has 7 elements in the break zone, you get to dull and freeze up to 3 characters because he's going to attack 3 times. And he has brave, so he just sits there. And then he'll have roughly 8K, first strike, haste, brave, and can attack 3 times every turn. So he is a disgustingly powerful card. And if you can make it work, then you are really probably winning that game because he's just that strong. So don't buy him now. Wait for the reprint. You'll thank me later. Cypher. When Cypher enters the field, you may put the top 2 cards of your deck into the break zone. When you do so, choose 1 category 8 forward other than Cypher in your break zone. Add it to your hand. When Cypher attacks, choose 1 for your opponent controls. If there are 10 or more cards in your break zone, break it. So there's ways to give him haste outside of the traditional means. There's cards like Raijin that give him haste, and 2K power if the conditions are met correctly. So this is a really good card because every time he attacks, as long as you have 10 cards in your break zone, no matter what they are, he's going to break something. So he is there to essentially move things out of the way and try to push for damage. And if you don't take care of him and get him out the way, then you're going to suffer a lot more. And he has a hand to the temple to tell you that, you should get that memorized, just like Axel from Kingdom Hearts. Next is Zendaya. She is from the same set, Opus 22. When she enters the field, you may search for 1 category 8 forward and put it and add it to your hand. Put the top 2 cards of your deck into the break zone. Choose 1 forward. It loses 4K power until the end of the turn. If there are 10 or more cards in your break zone, it loses 8,000 power instead. You can only use this ability during your turn and only once that turn. So this is a really good card to add cards to the break zone for Cypher. And it's also a really good card to remove something off the field without breaking it yourself. Because there's some cards that can't be broken. And then there's some cards that don't take damage. She gets around all of those and just reduces it by 8k power if you have 10 or more cards in the break zone. But this is just a good card all around. If you can figure out a way to reduce her by at least 1 CP to make her 4, she's that much better, because 5 gets into that gray area that's like, don't really want to cast this because it's going to cost me 3 cards. And if I'm playing 3 cards, I might as well play a 6. Yada, 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 yada. Figure it out, work it out, do some little testing. Get this card, please. This is a really good card for any deck that's running Lightning. And there's going to come a time where you're going to be able to add all your cards from the break zone back to your deck. There's going to be a time where you can add all the cards back from your remove from game back to the break zone, which could essentially get moved back to the deck. So just keep that in mind with cards like this. Next is Lulu. At the beginning of the attack phase, during each of your turns, you can remove two summons in your break zone from the game. When you do so, choose 1 forward, deal it 7k. Discard 1 summon, choose 1 forward, deal it 5k damage. So this is pretty good here, because the discard 1 summon is an action ability and it's also the cost. So if you want to do that multiple times, let's say you have 5 summons in hand, you can discard all 5 of those summons in different instances of a stack. It'll be the same stack, but you'll do it, then you'll do it again, then you do it again, vice versa, vice versa. And you essentially have 25,000 worth of damage you can distribute. And then if there's still something alive, you can attack and remove 2 of those 5 summons that you've already discarded to deal something another 7. And then her 5,000 worth of damage will go through to either being blocked or go straight to damage. Just a random scenario, but just something to just keep in mind, that action ability you can use more than once, but that attack ability can only be used once during the attack. So it's just some interaction that you might want to, keep in the back of your mind. Next is Orin. Orin this is probably my favorite Orin due to the art and the ability. The ability or the effects are, if you control 2 or more forwards, the cost to cast him is reduced by 2, making him a 3. At the end of each player's turn, if Orin has received 4,000 damage or more, draw a card. And then his action ability is at the cost of nothing. During this turn, the next damage dealt to you becomes 0 and deal Orin 8,000 damage instead. You can only use this ability once per turn. There is a bunch of things that deal you damage in order for you to get an ability off. Orin takes that damage to himself, and if he survives, he lets you draw a card. And if you're about to go into the final point of damage for the game, you can just use this right before the damage goes through. He absorbs it. As long as he doesn't get destroyed before that happens, you survive. He can still block, yada yada yada. He's just a really good card, and he costs 3 as long as you have 2 or more forwards on the field. So that is a really good supplement, and something that I think everyone should consider, just because of how strong he is and what he can do for whatever deck that he's in. Next is Jekt. When Jekt is put from the field into the break zone, you may search for 1 fire forward of cost 7 or more, play it onto the field. So I think this card is good because it makes it to where anytime there comes a forward that's fire that costs 7 or more, Jekt is automatically in the conversation because he can search it and play it. Right now, there's stuff like the Demon, Braska's Final Aeon, things of that nature that he can essentially turn himself into. He has 9,000, so he is a strong attacker or a strong blocker. Either way, he is providing board presence, and it makes your opponent think twice about if they're going to destroy him or not. 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to return him to your hand, but sometimes there's just an instance where they have to destroy him, and that ability just has to be let gone through. So it's a really good card. It's a rare, so it's not going to be expensive at all. So get yourself 3 copies. Treat yourself. Next is Lightning, the Limit Break Lightning. When she enters the field, choose 1 lightning summon in your break zone, add it to your hand. So this is gonna go really well with the new remove from Final Fantasy 16, the Sadolphus Prime remove. Just because he lets you cast summons, and when you do cast summons, you get to deal, I believe it's 8k to an active forward. It might just be any forward, but I'm pretty sure it's an active. If I'm wrong, then I mean I'm wrong. But this helps you get back summons that you may want to play, and then it helps facilitate things like the other Ramuh summon, that if you play a lightning summon or lightning character forward that turn, you get to play him for free. And I think he does like 7,000 to somebody. So there's multiple ways that this helps. I mean, you can get back an Odin, you can get back a Remove, you can get back a Raiden. There's so many different summons that you can get back with this card. And it's also a Final Fantasy 13 card. So if you're teaming it up with Sarah, that's 2 of the 3 that you need to actually make Sarah's ability go off. So really good card, really good limit break. Once again, the stat line is kind of not great, but the effect kind of makes up for it, in my opinion. Witch of the Fens. When Witch of the Fens enters the field, if you control a monster, draw a card. Put 1 monster into the break zone, choose 1 forward, it loses 7,000 power until the end of the turn. That is not once per turn, and neither is that draw effect. So if you so happen to lose a Witch of the Fens in battle, you can just play another one, draw another card, and for however many monsters you have in the field, you can get rid of them because that's the cost, and reduce the power of something by 7,000. And that power reduction is insane and quite annoying. This card is really good, beautiful art. The full art's even more beautiful, if you could believe that. But this is a really good card, and I told you guys, I think a year, maybe 2 years ago, that monsters were going to be running a game. I was right. So just please take my advice and get you 3 copies of this card. Next is Caius. Caius is from Hidden Trials, one of my favorite sets from Final Fantasy. The art alone is enough to make you go, ugh. But the ability, he has Brave. When Caius enters the field, you may search a card named Bahamut, add it to your hand. During this turn, the cost required to cast your next Bahamut is reduced by 5. When Caius is put from the field to the break zone, you may discard 3 cards, and when you do so, play Caius from your break zone onto the field duel. So, a few things here. If you're playing the 13 deck, or if you're just playing Fang featuring some other 13 cards, you can play Fang, use her ability, reduce Caius by 2. He becomes a 3 caster. You play him, he searches Bahamut, any Bahamut, as long as it's card named Bahamut. So it's Bahamut, nothing else in the name. During that turn, it's reduced by 5. Doesn't have to be a summon, doesn't have to be a monster, doesn't have to be forward, just card name Bahamut. You play that summon, deal something, 10k, whatever Bahamut does. And then when he hits the break zone from the field, you can discard 3 cards if you want, and then play Caius on the field duel, which lets him get another Bahamut, and you can cast it for free. Obviously, I'm not going to mention the downsides of that because we all know the downsides: Amaterasu, Mist Dragon, such and such. But if all of this goes through, he is one of the strongest searchers of Bahamut and just protectors of the field I have ever seen, because he has Brave, and he doesn't have any negative downside when he goes to the break zone because it's not a must, it's a may. So you don't have to do it. You don't have to give up those resources if you don't want to. But if you're playing like a Black Waltz deck and you discard 3 Black Waltz of 1, 2, maybe 3, you're going to be dealing 12,000 damage spread out across, even if they do Amaterasu him or Mist Dragon you, whatever, you're still going to get some kind of reward for doing that. So that's just my opinion. And Caius is I think Caius is my favorite anti-hero villain from Final Fantasy. So I'm a little biased towards Caius, but yeah, that's just get you 3 copies. Renoa. This Renoa, man. When Renoa enters the field, choose 1/4 other than Renoa, remove it from the game, then play the forward onto the field duel. So if you go back and look at stuff like Caius, you can. So if you go back and look at stuff like Caius, you can play Caius, get to Bahamut, play that Bahamut, play Renoa, remove Caius, play Caius, get another Bahamut, play that Bahamut, or you can do it with Alcid, play Alcid, play Renoa, remove Alcid, play Alcid, play another Ice, or Lightning forward, and that way you're frozen. That's 1, 2, potentially 4 forwards on your opponent's field by playing essentially one card. One card enables all of that foolishness. So this is just a card I would have just for whatever reason, because it's just that good and it provides that much advantage to everything that you could do in a deck that needs to do the same ability multiple times over. And I think in the Final Fantasy VIII deck, Squall can play her for free if I'm not mistaken. The newer Squall from set 22, I believe, Opus 22. I'm not sure. It's one of the newer ones where he's swinging his sword, the same one that Cypher's in. Anyway, Luna Freya, Limit Break. This is a pretty good card, art-wise and everything. When she hits the field, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, add 1 card among them to your hand, and return the others to the bottom of your deck in any order. If the card added to your deck or to your hand has an EX burst, you may trigger its EX burst. The effect is put on the stack. So let's say you pop the 5 cards and you pull a Leviathan, the 6 drop. You can use that EX burst. It'll be put on the stack, so it is susceptible to being whatever interacted with outside of a standard EX burst. But you get to keep it in your hand, so you can just use the thing again if you need to or when you want to. So essentially you're getting 2 EX bursts for the cost of 1 card. So Luna Freya is really good in that instance. She costs a lot, but she costs a lot because she can potentially get you a lot. So cards like that are really good. She's fairly expensive in the realm of Final Fantasy cards, but overall she's not expensive. So get yourself 3 copies. Save the hassle. Just be prepared. Next is Hilda, Final Fantasy 2. Nothing really special about the card, but it has special implications if they choose to continue making Rebel Final Fantasy 2 support. First ability, duel her, search for 1 card Scott, play it onto the field. Second ability, duel her, choose 1 category, 2 forward in your break zone, add it to your hand, and you can only use this ability once per turn. She is Scott's wife, so that's why she searches and plays Scott. But she's also the princess that you meet at the beginning of Final Fantasy 2. And she pretty much gets back every Final Fantasy 2 forward that you could possibly play. So that's Minwoo, Maria, Leon, Scott, Joseph, I believe. I don't know if I said Maria, but if I did, whatever. So she gets back any card you need as far as forwards from Final Fantasy 2 to keep your combos going. So for that reason, I think she needs to be had just in case they make more Final Fantasy 2 support, which they did in Opus 24, Hidden Legends. So just, if you don't want to pick it up, just keep your eye on it. Keep your eye on upcoming sets and reviews and reveals. And just, like I said, always be prepared, always be ready. The full arts are like $2 to $3. So if you're going to get it, I would get the full art because the full art, as you can see here, it's pretty tasty. Next is Cloud of Darkness. When Cloud of Darkness enters the field, you may pay 2 crystals. When you do so, choose 1 forward your opponent controls, remove it from the game. As long as Cloud of Darkness is on the field, your opponent cannot play any copies of the remove card. Cloud of Darkness at damage 3 gains 2k power. I like this card because if you pay the 2 crystals, you get to remove a card like Warrior of Light, Leo, Une, Caius. What else is a hindrance? Cloud. Just any bothersome card that your deck really can't deal with. And in that time, as long as you can keep her alive, they can't play any more copies of that card. That same card, obviously, they can play one with a different name, different number, because it's not the same card. But they have to they have to spend resources to get rid of her. And the card that you remove doesn't come back. So that's just one less card. And if they're only running one of that card, even better for you. And with as many crystal generators as there are now, like, this card should be a no-brainer. So go get it. What are you waiting for? And the last card of all these cards that we've talked about over these past 2 videos is Noctis from the starter deck. Noctis is an EX burst. When he hits the field, you can search for pretty much Prompto, Gladiolus, and Ignis, job retainer. And when a forward that is a wind or earth hits the field outside of Noctis, choose one forward your opponent controls. The forward that you play deals damage equal to its power to the chosen forward on your opponent's side of the field. This will only trigger once per turn, but this is a pseudo, like, one-sided cannon. You get to hit them, they don't get to hit you back. And he can do this once per turn, every turn. So if you could play a forward on your opponent's turn, that's wind or earth, they get to take damage from the forward that you play. So you can make it to where you can play cards on your opponent's turn and your turn that are forwards of earth and wind. Pretty much decimate your opponent's field once per turn. And unless they get rid of Noctis, they really have to deal with it. But there's ways to buff Noctis. So he is a really good card. And he is a card I think that everyone should have in their arsenal, because he is in the process of becoming a king, and every prince deserves to be in your deck as they're going over that threshold to becoming a king. I hope these cards have helped you understand that how my brain works when it comes to card games, but also it helps you realize that some of these cards that you may have looked over, you might want to get before the prices either go up or they're just hard to get in play sets. And I don't want you to just have to spend shipping 3 different times from 3 different sellers to get 3 copies of the same card. So I want you to have this information, and as cards come out in the future, I'll make videos of cards that I think you should get based off what they are, who they are, and what they could potentially bring to your decks. I am New Never You, and I hope you have a fantastic Final Fantasy TCG journey. Peace.